Hi everyone, welcome back to my David Lynch series. My last video was on Twin Peaks, the television series, and now I'd like to talk a little bit about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is the theatrical film from 1992 that is a prequel to the events of the television series. Here is the soundtrack, which I've had for a long time. This is one of my favorite soundtracks, not just in terms of the score, but a lot of the songs themselves were actually co-written by Angelo Badalamenti, who wrote the score, as well as the score to a number of other David Lynch films. So in the television series, things got kicked off when the body of a high school girl named Laura Palmer was discovered. She was, of course, a resident of the town of Twin Peaks. The sheriff and an FBI agent named Dale Cooper began to investigate. During the course of the second season, it is revealed who the killer was, because that's a mystery for a long time. A lot of different people come under suspicion, but eventually find out who it was. As it turns out, I'm not going to spoil for you if you haven't seen the series and plan to exactly who it was, but it turns out that the person was under the influence of a kind of evil spirit known as Bob. So in the film, instead of obviously being the victim of a murder, this is Laura Palmer is the main character, and we find out basically what her life was like and in the days and I guess the week or so before that happened. The film begins with an event a year earlier. In the television series, the FBI agent, played by Kyle MacLachlan, tells the sheriff, Michael Onkeen, that there was another murder a year earlier in a neighboring town, or in somewhere in the vicinity, of a woman named Teresa Banks. There are similarities to the crime, so it appears that the same person committed the murder. So what happens is this film opens with the murder of Teresa Banks and the investigation into that by a couple of FBI agents who are played by Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland. So they come across some clues and they interview some locals and what have you, and then there's a jump forward a year to the town of Twin Peaks, where you see Laura Palmer and her friends and her family, and the kind of stuff that she's dealing with before that happens, before she dies. She is a very, very troubled person, Laura Palmer. She's a victim of sexual abuse, has been since she was 12. She tells a friend of hers that the evil spirit Bob has been having her since she was 12, and I believe this is, obviously this evil spirit is a metaphor, I think, for her sort of blocking out the identity of her attacker. Yeah, she's had a rather unhappy second half of her life, I guess you could say. She's gotten into a lot of drugs and prostitution, and she was seeing one guy, but mostly using him to acquire cocaine, and was having a relationship with another guy, but not necessarily in love with him either. There's a scene early on where he's insisting that they're in love and they should go away or something like that, and she says, "I'm already gone, James." She doesn't really believe in the kind of love that he believes in, and she's sort of lost hope. She's very sort of pessimistic and pragmatic about what her future will bring, if anything. Now, most of the characters in the film that were in the television series are played by the same actors. Some of them only have very, very small parts, like Machen Amick, for example, has like maybe 2 scenes in the whole picture. There's one part that's actually been recast. The part of her best friend, Donna, was played by Lara Flynn Boyle in the series. Lara Flynn Boyle really didn't want to do the film because she felt that the material was a little bit too risque, too overtly sexual and what have you. So she was recast with Moira Kelly, who I believe played a mother to someone on Seventh Heaven, or maybe I'm thinking of One Tree Hill, a television series. But she was known for being in The Cutting Edge back in the early 90s, the ice skating movie. I really like the contrast. I mean, Lara Flynn Boyle had a lot of good moments in the show. Especially in the pilot, she reacted, very well to learning that her best friend had died. That's like a really emotional scene. But I like Moira Kelly a lot, have liked her for a long time. And I really like the contrast between her and Sheryl Lee, who plays Laura Palmer in the film. I remember thinking at the time that Sheryl Lee looked like the kind of person that belongs on the cover of a magazine, whereas Moira Kelly looks like she belongs in a painting. There's a sort of different style. They're both very beautiful, but Moira Kelly is just she's got a different look to her, which is a good contrast because Donna's a more sheltered character, a bit more naive and innocent, and she has kind of a thing for James, even though James is, she is the only other person aware that James and Laura have been seeing each other recently. If I have any issues with this movie, it's mostly regarding the fact that since it is a prequel, there's a number of scenes, particularly in the end, where it just seems like the only real purpose is to just basically depict visually and dramatize things that we already know about from the TV series, things that happened to Laura. As the federal agent and the sheriff and all his deputies go about their investigation, and other characters conduct their investigation as well, we get a good sense as to what her last few days were like and some of the events that night leading up to her death. So there's it's a bit tedious watching that stuff actually play out because, it just felt sort of like going through the motions to show pretty much exactly what we figured would happen and what the other characters guessed had happened back when the show was on. And the final scenes are really, really drawn out. Especially once Laura is abducted by her killer and then is taken to the old abandoned train car where the murder happens. And then we get scenes of her in the, what they call the red room, the room with the red curtains. It's in sort of like this otherworldly state, like not really the afterlife, but just some sort of spiritual realm where she meets the dwarf who speaks backwards. And she also meets Dale Cooper as well. Kyle MacLachlan really doesn't have a large part in this film. He's just in, I don't know, maybe about 4 scenes. And his attitude as a character is a lot different from the show. In the show, he's very sort of upbeat and wide-eyed and enthusiastic and optimistic and just, just all-around friendly guy. And he seems a lot more sort of creeped out by everything in this one. The first scene that he's in, actually, takes place immediately after the Teresa Banks sequence. Or at least these scenes involving Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland. I think it's set in Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken, and the FBI office there gets a visitor in the form of a former agent, one who had been missing for a few years. He's played by David Bowie. And when he walks into the building and into the office to meet Kyle MacLachlan and the other FBI agents, suddenly the movie just goes absolutely haywire. Who knows what this guy has been through, but he's carrying something really seriously strange with him because immediately everything just goes nuts. You get all these weird flashes to telephone poles, and the security cameras start acting up, and then you get this very bizarre sequence involving backwards talking people and just crazy imagery. There's a slew of really bizarre imagery. And I got to think to myself, what was David Lynch telling the actors was going on in this scene? Did he tell them exactly what all this stuff meant or what the symbolism for it was? How did he direct them? How did they give a performance under such bizarre, abstract circumstances? Very, very strange. And there's a number of scenes like that in the movie. David Lynch, puts dream sequences often in his films, but this one's one of the most bizarre scenes, I've ever seen in anything. It's just very, very, very weird. There's a number of really strange things and unsettling things too, just really bizarre stuff. There's a really fun scene where Laura receives a gift from a couple of random people she just meets out in a parking lot of a framed picture of a doorway, which she's told to hang in her bedroom. And then her dream that night involves her walking through the doorway and then encountering all kinds of weird stuff in her dream. And when she wakes up, she has this kind of look on her face like, okay, what was all that about? She takes the picture and she puts it face down on her desk. She's like, I don't want that to happen again. That was too weird. Yeah, a lot of good music, a lot of good acting. Boy, Sheryl Lee has a really, really tough job in this. She's got to play so many different things. Yeah, it's probably a tough challenge. I don't know what I think of her as an actress overall, but I'd say there was a lot of stuff in this movie that she played very well in addition to the other actors, and she had a lot of crazy things to do. So yeah, during like the mid-90s, I had a copy of this, and I would watch it over and over and over again, studying it, trying to figure out what all of it meant and everything. It's crazy, crazy movie. But again, I just think that the weakness of it is just being a prequel, and especially how long and drawn out the ending is. One of the last scenes in the movie is Laura sitting with Dale Cooper in the Red Room, in the otherworldly place, after she's been murdered, and there's just close-up on her that just goes on forever, of her like smiling happily but crying at the same time, like she's relieved to finally be dead and not be in pain anymore or not have to suffer anymore. But it just goes on and on and on. And I'd say there's one benefit to that, and that is the music during that moment is particularly great, and the longer the scene goes on, the more music there is, so that's a good thing, I guess. So it's one of my favorites, despite the issues I have with it, and there are a few. It's one of my favorite David Lynch films, and one that I never really get tired of watching, at least parts of anyway. So there's my view on Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Very, very interesting picture. And the next one I'm going to be doing is Lost Highway, which came out in 1997, and that might just very well be my favorite David Lynch theatrical film. I'll talk more about that later. I have to rewatch it first, of course. But it made my top 10 list of 97 back in 1997, so yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, and again, if you want to make a video response to any of the David Lynch movies I'm talking about and attach it to mine, I'll include it in the playlist, the link for which is below, so all the review videos will be in one spot as usual. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.